I never planned to go no contact. Honestly, I spent most of my life just trying to be seen. My name's not important, but what I've lived through, it might be. Especially if you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own home. If you've ever had to smile through clenched teeth while your family held up your abuser like he was a saint, this story is for you. Because this is the story of how I went from a neglected, unloved son, living out of a camper, to owning a house that my entire family tried to steal from under me. Yeah, you heard that right. Steal my house. But before I get to the part where the cops were called, fake rental agreements were torn up, and my sister-in-law physically attacked me while pregnant, let's rewind. Let me show you how this all started. I was the older brother, 3 years ahead of Dan, but you'd never know it from how we were treated. From the moment Dan could walk and whine at the same time, he became the son my parents orbited around. And me, I was just the thing in the way of their perfect family portrait. If Dan broke a toy, it was my fault for leaving it where he could reach it. If he hit me, and he hit me a lot, I was punished for provoking him. Every time I tried to defend myself, I was told I needed to suck it up or be the bigger person. Dan knew it too. Knew he could get away with anything. He would do things like flirt with girls he knew. I liked hell. Even my girlfriend at one point. He would crack jokes about my clothes, my job, my loser energy, all while basking in our parents' praise for being charismatic and a natural leader. What they called charisma, I called cruelty. What they called leadership, I lived as manipulation. I still remember the day my high school girlfriend dumped me. I'd brought her to a family cookout. Dan had barely said hello before launching into full charm mode. He made her laugh, showed off, threw in a few passive-aggressive jokes about how quiet I was. By the end of the week, she ghosted me completely. A month later, they were dating. My parents, they invited her over like nothing happened. I moved out before I even finished high school, slept on friends' couches, worked late shifts just to avoid going home. My parents didn't even show up to my graduation, said they didn't know it was happening. Dan's football games, though, full-blown family caravans. Eventually, they moved 150 miles away, to be closer to nature, they said. But the real reason? Extended family had started noticing how badly I was treated. My grandparents once pulled my mom aside and said, "You know you have 2 sons, right? That was the last holiday we ever spent together." I kept things low contact after that. Birthdays became text. Holidays became working. The truth was, I just couldn't stomach pretending anymore. But I still didn't hate them. Not then. Then 2020 hit, and like so many people, I lost everything. I worked in retail, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. When the lockdowns hit, I was let go. No savings, no severance, just a "we'll call you when we reopen." Spoiler, they never did. My lease ended 2 months later, and I couldn't afford to renew it. I sold almost everything I owned and scraped together enough to buy a junky old camper and retrofit it to hook into my pickup. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. A temporary solution until I could find my footing. Desperate, I called my parents. I hadn't asked them for anything in years. I just wanted to park my camper in their driveway, not live inside, just park, maybe hook into a power outlet now and then. Their answer? A cold, clipped no. They said the house was full. Dan and his wife Sil lived there with their 3 kids, and if I wanted to stay, I'd have to pay rent, not a token fee either. Apartment-level rent to park in the driveway. "You're not entitled to charity," my dad told me. "You chose to live like this." Dan chimed in, laughing in the background, calling my camper an eyesore. My mom said she didn't want me bringing druggies or weirdos around the kids. I hung up. Then I cried in a gas station parking lot, surrounded by strangers. Those were some of the hardest months of my life. Every night I found a new place to park, a dark side street, a church lot. Sometimes I woke up to people banging on my door, drunks, cops, beggars, once even a guy trying to pry open the back hatch. I charged my batteries illegally behind fast food joints, showered at gyms, and prayed for a break that never came. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It forces you to build. That's where pause. Because from here, the story changes. I'll tell you how I clawed my way back. How I found a job, made friends, bought a house, and how, the moment I stood on solid ground, the same family who left me for dead tried to take it all away. But not this time. This time I fought back. So there I was, living in a camper I barely understood how to maintain, eating peanut butter out of the jar, parked behind an abandoned strip mall with my windows blacked out, so no one would try to break in. I'll be honest, there were nights I thought about giving up entirely, not in a dramatic way, just this quiet, sinking feeling that maybe this was all I'd ever be. The screw-up. the disappointment. The family's black sheep turned actual drifter. But something kept me going. Maybe spite, maybe hope, maybe just the stubborn belief that I couldn't let my story end there. Homeless, forgotten, mocked by the very people who were supposed to love me. I started picking up whatever gig work I could find. Odd jobs, delivery runs, temp shifts, nothing stable, nothing that paid more than gas and food, but enough to keep moving. And in a weird way, that camper started to feel like armor. It was tiny, yes, cramped, cold, but it was mine, a bubble of solitude in a world that wanted nothing to do with me. I stopped calling my family. They didn't call either. I guess that part was mutual. Months passed. The pandemic dragged on. My days were a blur of Craigslist jobs, instant ramen, and dodging city officials trying to tow me off public land. Then one afternoon, I got a call, a job offer. Not retail, not fast food, an actual company. Logistics and dispatching, boring on paper but with a real paycheck. Health insurance, a foot back into the world. There was a catch. It was in a neighboring city, 2 hours from where I was aimlessly floating, but I didn't care. I packed up that camper like it was my whole life, because, well, it was, and drove straight there. The company wasn't fancy. The office was a converted warehouse on the edge of an industrial park. But the boss, he was decent. A little gruff, but fair. After a couple weeks, he pulled me aside and asked, "You live out of that thing full time?" I nodded, expecting judgment. Instead, he said, "I've got a fenced back lot, got power and water hookups for trucks. You keep it clean and do some overtime on Sundays. I'll let you stay there for free." I could have cried. Actually, I think I did, just not in front of him. That back lot became my home. Not just a place to park, but a place to breathe. I had power, water, safety, and for the first time in forever, some actual human kindness. There was a security guard named Will who worked nights. He would come by and chat during my late shifts, we'd trade stories, me about my family chaos, him about his divorce and rebuilding his life. He became one of my closest friends. I worked my ass off. Every extra shift, every Sunday, every crappy late-night assignment. And it paid off. By mid-year, they promoted me to supervisor. I got a raise, some actual savings, and even a little respect. That's when I started thinking bigger. I didn't want to live in a camper forever. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to live. So I started house hunting. Not luxury homes, not big, flashy spaces, just something mine, solid, safe, permanent. After a few months of searching, I found it, a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a quiet lot just outside the city. Backyard, decent neighbors, and enough space to park the camper. I poured nearly everything I had into that down payment, drained my savings, held my breath through the closing process. And then, it was done. I had a house. Let me say that again. I had a house. After everything, after being cast out, mocked, and left to rot, I walked through that front door, keys in hand, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I parked the camper in the backyard and wired it up as a guest space, a reminder of what I'd come from and how far I'd climbed. I bought furniture off Craigslist, painted the walls myself, ate dinner on a folding table for weeks, and it didn't matter, because every creak, every flaw, every scratch in that house, it was mine. No more begging for space. No more sleeping with a crowbar under my pillow. No more fake smiles at family dinners where I was always the afterthought. For the first time since I was a kid, I felt safe. I should have known that peace wouldn't last. Because just when I thought I was free, they came back. All of them. My parents, Dan, Sil, and their kids. Uninvited, unapologetic, and ready to take everything I'd built for themselves. But they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. Not the quiet kid, not the pushover. Not the one who used to sleep in the truck and cry in secret. No, that version of me died in the camper. The man who answered the door, he was ready for war. It started with a knock. Not a text, not a call, no warning. Just a knock at my front door. I opened it, and there they were. My parents, Dan, his wife Sil, their 3 kids, and from the way Sil was holding her belly, I could tell soon to be 4. They stood on my porch like I had invited them. Like this was some kind of family reunion. I froze. Then my dad clapped me on the shoulder like we hadn't spoken in years, because we hadn't, and said, "So this is the palace, huh?" Palace. It was a modest house, cozy, clean, but to them, it was too much for someone like me. Before I could say a word, they were walking in, kids dragging muddy shoes across my floor. My mom poking her head into rooms, Dan dropping himself on my couch like it was already his. 3 bedrooms? My mom said, this is a lot of space for one man. Dan chimed in, bet it gets lonely, huh? I stood there in my own home, watching my abusers make themselves comfortable, like they belonged, like I didn't. Then Dan pulled me aside. Listen, he said, in that smug, entitled tone I knew too well, Syl's pregnant again, and we were really tight on space. You've got 3 rooms here, and you're just one guy. I said nothing, just stared. So here's what I'm thinking, he continued. We move in. Kids take the 2 rooms. You sleep out back in the camper. No biggie, you're used to it. He smiled like it was a gift, like he was doing me a favor. I asked, and rent? Dan laughed. Coleman, man, we were family. Then he handed me a printed list. It was a schedule, rules, curfews, even limitations on when I could use the kitchen. In my own house. You'd still have your camper, he added, like that made it okay. And the kids need a yard. This place is perfect. I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I just pulled out my phone and hit record. Then I said, calmly, no. Dan blinked. What? No, I repeated. You are not moving into my home. I own this house. This is mine. He scoffed. You don't deserve this. You're alone, no wife, no kids. What do you even need this space for? I worked for it, I said. Every inch, while you were busy being the golden child, I was surviving, building. Dan stepped closer. This is about family. No, I said. This is about control, and you're not in charge anymore. That's when the others joined in. My parents cornered me, saying I was being selfish, that Dane's kids deserved a better life, that I should just do it for Dan. Syl began crying, screaming that I was ruining her pregnancy, that I was a monster, that no real man would turn away his own brother's family. Then she lunged. She slapped the phone out of my hand, grabbed my shirt, screamed in my face. Pregnant and all, she came at me like she wanted to tear me apart. I stepped back, held my hands up, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, if you don't leave right now, I will call the police. They paused. I picked up my phone, showed them it was still recording. I have everything, I said. Try anything, and I'll press charges. The room went silent. They backed off, but not with grace. My mother hissed, you'll regret this. Dan muttered, you've changed. No, I said. I just finally see things clearly. As they left, my father turned at the door and said, you have 1 week to come to your senses. But I'd already made up my mind. That week? I spent it wisely. I posted my story unedited, unfiltered, online. I included clips of the recording, screenshots of texts, and within days, extended family I hadn't heard from in years reached out. Aunts, uncles, cousins, messages flooded in. They believed me, they saw the truth. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Dan had stepped on, or the only one my parents had manipulated. The narrative they'd built for years of me being unstable, dramatic, ungrateful, crumbled. Suddenly, I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the survivor. And I wasn't done yet. A week later, like clockwork, they came back. Same knock. This time, I didn't open the door. I installed chain latches, reinforced the frame. When they tried to force it open, I spoke through the gap. I don't love you, I said flatly. You were terrible parents, and Dan, you were never my brother. You were a bully with a safety net. They tried again, bleeding, guilt-tripping, my mom crying, my dad trying to sound logical. I didn't budge. 3 days passed. I came home from work, and something felt off. The front lock was different. I opened the door, and there they were. Dan, Syl, their kids. Boxes everywhere. Syl was folding laundry on my couch. Dan was screwing a bookshelf into the wall. They drilled out my lock, replaced it, and moved in. I stood frozen. Then I turned, walked back to my truck, locked the doors, and called 911. Syl followed me outside, slammed her fists on my window, screamed that I was ruining everything, that I was going to destroy their family. The 911 operator heard it all. Police arrived within 15 minutes. At first, my parents claimed I had given permission, that this was a misunderstanding. Dan handed over a rental agreement. My signature scribbled at the bottom. It was fake. Sloppy. I pointed out half a dozen inconsistencies and showed them the real deed. My name, my mortgage. Then I dropped the bomb. Pressing charges, I said, breaking and entering, forgery, assault. And if I'm really feeling generous, I'll call CPS next. Sill's face went white. Dan swore. My mother began crying, but for once, it didn't matter. Because the police were listening to me. Not them. Under threat of arrest, they began moving their stuff back into the truck. Dan tossed the new keys into a storm drain in a fit of rage. The officers made him climb down and retrieve them. And as they stood on my front lawn, disgraced, defeated, humiliated, I gave them the speech I had waited a lifetime to deliver. All my life, I said. You told me I was less than, that I was nothing. You used me as a scapegoat for everything. While you lifted him up, I was being torn down. And now, you came crawling back, not because you love me, but because you want what I built. You don't deserve this house. You don't deserve my time. And after today, you won't have either. My father mumbled, "We were horrible parents." I nodded. Yes, you were. And then I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled. The war was over, but there was one last battle ahead. Christmas Eve, where they try one final time to claw their way back in. And this time, the whole family would be watching. Christmas Eve. It used to be the loneliest night of the year for me. Growing up, it was the one night I wanted to feel like part of something. But instead, it always turned into a showcase for Dan. His gifts were bigger, his stocking heavier, his jokes funnier. I was the afterthought. The "oh yeah, he's here too" sibling. But not this year. This year, things were different. My house was warm, lit, full of laughter, packed with cousins, uncles, aunts, and even my grandparents, people who had driven in from hours away just to be with me. We ate, we told stories, we raised glasses to the fact that I had finally found my footing. At one point, my grandfather clinked his glass and said, "We were proud of you. You didn't just survive, you rose on your own. That takes strength." For a moment, I almost cried. Then came the knock. Again, I knew it before I opened the door. Dan, Sill, my parents, all of them, standing in the cold. No gifts, no apologies, just entitlement, wrapped in winter coats. Before I could say anything, they stepped inside, like they still had the right. "Wow," my mom said, "so this is the party." Sill scanned the room, nose wrinkled. "Guess we didn't get the invite." "Nope," I said, blocking the entryway. Behind me the laughter had gone quiet. Then my uncle stepped forward. A man who had known me since I was in diapers, who had watched years of silent suffering and never had the full picture until I posted my story. He said, "What are you doing here?" "We were family," my mom snapped. "Family?" My uncle laughed. "You mean the ones who broke into this house, forged a rental agreement, assaulted their own blood? That family?" My grandmother, God bless her, the gentlest woman alive, walked up beside him and said, "You were told, stay away. You made your bed." Dan looked around, hoping for allies. He found none. Cousins looked away. Aunts whispered behind hands. The whole room had seen the video, heard the voicemails, read the receipts. Dan's illusion was dead. Then Sill, predictably, snapped. "You don't understand," she yelled. "We needed space. Our kids deserve better. He has a whole house and he's hoarding it alone." That's when I stepped in. "You think this is about space?" I asked. "You think this is about a guest room?" I looked right at her. "You're a bad mother." Her mouth dropped open. "You don't raise those kids," I continued. "My mother does. You post Instagram stories about how hard parenting is, but I've seen it. You hand off the work while you sit on your phone." Gasps echoed around the room, but no one disagreed. Dan tried to speak, but then something unexpected happened. His eldest son, maybe 9 or 10, stepped forward and asked, "Why did you try to steal Uncle's house?" The room went silent. Dan stammered. "It wasn't like that." But the damage was done. That simple question from his own son was like a needle popping a balloon, the fantasy, the ego, the years of getting away with it. Gone. Then more voices joined in. A cousin chimed, "Remember when you made fun of me for working retail, Dan? Called me a failure at Thanksgiving?" Someone else added, "And when you stiffed me for $500 and laughed about it?" The room turned. Not violently, not cruelly, just decisively. Dan stood there, surrounded, red-faced. Sill clutched her purse like she was about to run. My parents? They said nothing. For once they had no script, no defense. Because there was nothing left to say. They left in silence. Don's head bowed, Sill muttering under her breath, my mom wiping her eyes, my dad guiding them toward the car like they were fugitives retreating from a battle they never expected to lose. And just like that, they were gone. The days that followed were quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I hosted game nights, cooked dinners, invited coworkers over for movies, and every time I looked out at that old camper in my backyard, I smiled, not with shame but with pride. That camper wasn't just a place I survived in. It was the crucible where I was forged. Sil tried one last push online. Passive-aggressive posts about toxic relatives and men who refused to help struggling families. But no one took the bait, not after everything. Even her own parents refused to let them move in. Dan eventually had to crawl back to our parents' house, tail between his legs, 4 kids, no job, a wife constantly on her phone, and parents who were now completely cut off from most of the family. Me? I finally had peace. No apologies were ever given, no olive branch extended, and I didn't need one, because I wasn't seeking their love anymore. I had my house. I had my freedom. And I had the knowledge that I was no longer the forgotten son. I was the man who stood up and stayed standing. If you made it this far, thank you. Seriously, this wasn't just a story about family. It was a story about survival, about standing your ground, and about learning to value yourself even when the people closest to you don't. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, if you've ever had to build peace from the ground up after being torn down by the people who should protected you, drop a comment, tell your story, you're not alone. And if this video hit home, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm this story mattered. And maybe, just maybe, it'll find someone else who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories like this, the kind they don't put in movies, but should. Thanks for watching. Stay strong, stay standing.